It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Our guest today is CEO Helen Fu Thomas. Helen is the chairman, chief executive officer, and co-founder of Touchjet USA. An award-winning entrepreneur and marketer, Helen has a track record of building technology and digital media companies from the startup to exit. She was the founding CEO of LeapFrog China, and at Livescribe, she grew worldwide sales from 0 to 50 million within 3 years. She also built BlueFocus Communication Group from 0 to 200 million in the North American market within 2 years. Helen Fu Thomas, welcome into the corner office.
Hi, Brent. Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your earlier years. What was it like growing up as a kid?
Lots of writing, lots of reading. Just try to learn as much as possible. And in those days, there was very little technology.
Where did you grow up, Helen?
I was born and raised in Beijing, China, the capital city of China.
Awesome. Great. And you did your early education there as well, which we'll talk about in a minute?
All the way up to college.
Wow. Excellent. Terrific. So we're looking forward to hearing that trajectory, which, is an exciting one because we do have a very diverse audience, people that have come from lots of different backgrounds. And like yourself, also are immigrants that have grown up and are aspiring to, as well as having been successful here. What about your mom and dad? What did they do? What were their jobs and their influence on you growing up?
My father is an engineer, electronic engineer. And my mother was an accountant in a construction company.
And both from the Beijing area, or did they commute in from outside provinces to start their career and their life in Beijing?
They both had their careers in Beijing. They actually met in Beijing, although the interesting background is that both of their families are from Hainan Island. So Hainan Island is like Hawaii of the United States. So,
right. Excellent. And so did they grow up there and then go to school in Beijing? Is that what brought them there, or did they move to Beijing with their careers?
My mother grew up in Beijing. My father actually got his college degree in southern China and then moved up to Beijing, and they met in Beijing.
Awesome. Well, you grew up during the time, I believe, of the one-child policy. It might have changed during that point in time. Were you the only child, or did you have siblings as well?
I was born before the one-child policy was in place.
Okay.
They could have more than one, but they chose to have one.
Got it. Right. So that's quite common in China. I don't know if you know this or not, but I lived in Asia for about a decade and worked out of Singapore and got lots of exposure to the culture and just a fascinating part of the world. What were you like as a student? As we would say in the U.S., were you an A student, someone who was always studying, getting the top grades in the class? Were you kind of more middle of the road, or was school not your thing growing up?
Well, definitely the A student, because we didn't know better not to be an A student. There was not an option not to be the A student.
Right. Very competitive, I can imagine.
Out of, billion people, I think the percentage of students actually could go to colleges back then is even much lower than today.
Wow, very competitive. And what about leadership roles or any entrepreneurial things growing up? In this country, of course, there's a much more common involvement as it relates to, young men that might have paper routes, girls that might sell lemonade by the side of the road. Were there those types of activities, anything outside of school that you were involved with in the early days from a business or entrepreneurial standpoint?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting if I look back, since very early on, I worked as a copywriter for my grandfather, whose
Ah.
handwriting was not recognizable. So I almost worked every single day after school just to copyright what he put in the journal. And he was part of the historical research. So his full-time job is to provide historical facts of World War II and all that. I always played a leadership role in, a K-12 in, elementary school, middle school, high school. In high school, my almost my full-time role is because I was the president of the student association from early on. So I kind of
Would that be kind of like the equivalent of student government, or was it more of a social type of responsibility when you say student association?
It's academically, has to be profoundly ahead of everybody else socially, as well as to work with the principals of the schools and the teachers and faculties, and it being that liaison between the student body and the school itself. So,
got it. And how many years were you involved in that?
All the way up to college. I played that role, early on, from middle school to high school, and as well as in college.
And were there different types of leadership positions? In other words, in the U.S., a student that would pursue that would be, potentially president or maybe, of their class or head of certain activities. Did you play a variety of different roles, or was it always in the top slot?
That's interesting. I was in the top slot.
I knew the answer to that question.
Well, the school actually is not just the class. How did I get there? I had no clue. I can't recall. I could only I had the memories in terms of because a lot of it is also out of school. It's between our school with the other schools.
Right.
And also traveling, representing the city of Beijing as head of my school, and went to different provinces and different parts of China. Fantastic. So it was quite a journey. I really had lots of opportunities back then to learn, how to lead, how to balance between academics and community activities, as well as critical thinking and be creative.
Well, it sounded like you traveled quite a bit around the country. Was that on a quite regular basis? Was it kind of 2 or 3 times a year? And what parts of China did you travel to when you made those trips?
There are 2 parts. One, personally, my grandfather always took summer trips because it's extremely hot in Beijing. So I got opportunities to go to coastal cities with him, almost like his personal assistant.
Nice.
And
nice.
Also, because I'm involved in lots of extracurricular, activities. So I would go to, the east coast of China and some other parts outside Beijing.
Right. And would you get paid for that work that you did for your granddad, whether it was the writing? No. That was a pretty quick answer. Never on the table, never discussed, I presume.
Yep.
Now, we hear a lot about generational families in Asia. I certainly saw that. Was your grandfather in your home growing up? And were you 2-3 generations there? Or was it, at that point in time, him living in a separate family situation?
I actually grew up with my grandparents. I was the oldest grandchild because my mother was the oldest daughter out
Right.
of five children. Um, Partially because my grandparents lived in a courtyard, and um, it's an environment that is easier for a child like me.
To
While my
play in and have your
it,
roam around, etc. Yeah.
exactly, I was very fortunate to have that opportunity to be, spending time with him and learning.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just think that's so special. We miss that in the Western culture. I knew so many of my employees who, even in Singapore, but also other parts of Asia, who came up in those multi-generational families. And there's just so much wisdom and so many things that can be learned from, having those two or three generations apart. And I suppose, again, because both your parents work full time, I assume your grandmother and or your grandfather, had a little more time for you. Did you physically live in their home then and were there for many years? Wow. And that was all through your school years?
They have a private space. They have their private kitchen bathroom, which is luxury. Well, my parents had shared apartments, and eventually went to middle school. I moved back to my parents' home, but it's a very unique childhood. I think built the foundation of independence. I left China right after college,
Yeah.
and I found my way all around North America. So I have to say, those early, years might have built something in me
Interesting.
that enabled me to do
Yeah. Be more
what
independent.
I've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. What were some of those key lessons? It sounds like your grandfather and you had a very special relationship. I can imagine being the oldest grandchild and a granddaughter, which of course is very special. If you think back to those years, those early years when you were doing, your calligraphy for him and traveling, what would you say two or three of the key lessons you learned from him about business and about life?
My grandfather was a World War II hero, and he
Oh,
fought along the lines with the Allies, the British and the American.
yes, fantastic.
So the historical facts about the World War II, as I was a copywriter, so I got to read them before anybody else got to read them.
Oh, yeah,
The the fact that you know how the Chinese could have survived and then won the war at the end after lots of sacrifices,
right.
as well as just saw respect that he has earned given what he did, because he's social circle are the others, at his age and shared, life death experience.
Yeah,
We had overseas visitors once China opened the doors. So people from Canada, people from
the
Hong Kong,
UK. Yeah.
eventually even people from Taiwan started to come in and reunited with him and talk about what happened years ago. So it really gives you, give me as a child the spectrum of life.
Wow, fantastic.
Because I think most children grow up just thinking about what's in front of them. My learning gave me a much broader perspective. Life is not just now and today and how I grow up. You look at his life, the war and, China and, those writing and research and the raising a granddaughter like me. And every day I got home, he would, you know, really cheered up and say, "Oh, the big student is home." He in Chinese it's
So
almost
proud
like
of you.
the college student, because when you say 大学生, it's like I was just elementary school kid, but he always gave me that welcome and that cheer and make me feel like I will go to college, right?
Right, right. Interesting. So really kind of a projection, right? He was giving you projection motivation, it sounds like.
That's absolutely correct.
About
That's
your
right.
future.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And it sounds like you got a lot of international exposure too with the people that would come and visit. Did you get a chance to meet some of those folks from some of
Always,
his wartime period?
always.
Yeah.
As I said, I was the personal assistant. I was there.
Yeah, right, right.
I
You
was
were there. You were bringing the tea and helping him with, all the introductions. And these were people that he fought alongside for the most part, or were they contacts from?
That's right. And lots of them um, were in his army, and he was more like a commander. So you
Wow,
saw these
wow.
people, total strangers. They broke into tears, saluted
Hmm.
him as if he's someone very special. And
Hmm.
I was being seen, not being
Great
heard,
respect.
right? I was just there watching,
Right,
not
right,
a
right. Of
word.
course, of course.
Um, it's a tremendous experience for me in the first before I became a teenager. That's what life is all about, is my grandparents, my school, and all these unexpected events, now and then. So it's very special.
Fantastic. Wow. What an experience. And do you think you got a little flavor for things international at the time? Do you think that might have seeded your eventual immigration to the US and your success here?
I didn't know back then, but I
Yeah.
chose international finance as my major when I went to college, and then right after, even before I graduated from college, I was spending tremendous amount of time on test preparation for those, GRE, GMAT, TOEFL, everything that would take for me to get a scholarship and to go get more education in grad school
Right.
outside China. That was one of my main focuses, because I really want to learn more.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a real hunger for education, it sounds like a hunger for learning.
That's true. That's true.
Now, getting to college in China is, of course, I'm sure very different than in the U.S.
Yes.
My daughter's a freshman at Dartmouth, and oh boy, I'll tell you what we went through and all the applications and all that. What was it like for you? Was it kind of a predetermined college that you would go to? Do you go through an application process, and how did you select, or where did you, finally, or what were the circumstances around where you went for your undergraduate degree?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your daughter. Dartmouth is one of the first schools I visited with my son. And my
Ah,
son is
fantastic.
sophomore. So I definitely went to my favorite colleges on the East Coast.
Where is he studying now?
He's at the boarding school. He's at the Deerfield Academy.
Oh, Deerfield. My daughter went to Taft for her high school years, and Deerfield was one of her first choices. So there sounds like they're on a similar path.
Small world, isn't it?
And Deerfield's quite close, in fact, to Dartmouth. Not more than about an hour away, I think, something like that.
And about an hour and a half.
Yeah, an hour and a half.
And
Fantastic.
yeah, I mean, they even share like similar logos, or their athletic gear so similar.
Yeah, they're both green.
Exactly. I love that school. I love that town. So talking about
Yeah. So your college. How does it work in China? Did you have a selection? Was there?
it's very
Yeah,
competitive. First of
I can
all,
imagine.
is national standard exams. You felt like you studied your whole life just for that college
Yeah.
entry exam, and they're very selective. There are top schools like Peking University or Tsinghua University. I went to Renmin University, is one of the top three in Beijing.
And how does it work? Did you apply to several schools, or do you get selected based on your test scores? How does it work in China?
It's interesting because of all the things I did, and a very unusual exposure as the president of the student body, all that. I was pre-selected
Right.
by one of the three schools, and so I didn't have to go through even application or the exams.
You had to choose. Yeah.
I got first of all they said, okay, we'll admit you. It's like a pre-commit, right? And they told me, well, here are the majors. And I said, I really want international finance. That's like the top major in that school, and that's like at the very beginning of having that kind of major in China. So it's very competitive, very, very. I mean, if people around the country apply to that major at that school. And I still don't understand how I made up my mind and basically told them, how dare I say that, but I did. I said, I'd love to come to your school, but I really want this major. So if you don't think you would pre-admit me, I would just go take the exams.
Good for you. And did they?
I was in. I was in.
Fantastic. And what was it that led you to choose that major? What was it about international finance that attracted you?
I think it's a rare factor. It's just how competitive, how rare that is. That's like one of the first in the country.
Yeah.
Number two is it's a global, international appeal. And the number three is they actually have American teachers.
Oh, really? Oh, terrific.
Like taught in that school for that major.
And so classes that were in English as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
and native English, not Chinese English. Right?
Right. Fantastic. And again, I know the university system is probably a little different. Is it a 3-year degree undergrad, 2-year, 4-year? 4-year. Got it. So similar to the U.S. in that respect. And did you know going in that you eventually wanted to go to grad school?
I'm not sure. I knew it at the beginning. It was just such a thrill I could get in college and one of the top majors in one of the top schools.
Yeah.
I think eventually I felt like it's not enough. Even I had the best professors in finance, international finance. Even the job perspectives are really, really good. And my peers all went to the biggest banks and the international corporations and had great jobs. But somehow, I think for whatever reason, I felt like I should pursue more education. I want to really see the world outside China to practice what I learned. So I decided to apply for MBA overseas.
So that decision was made during your undergrad years.
Yes.
And I'm sure the college curriculum was intensive there, but did you again work? Was there any outside extracurricular activity, anything in the arts that you pursued? We didn't talk about that, music or otherwise. What were some of the things that you did with what little spare time you had, Helen?
That's a very interesting question. It'll be a little bit a longer answer because you asked different aspects. Number one, I started working as a liaison or representative of overseas business because my English is very good. I work as interpreters. I worked as basically in the so-called representative offices of overseas companies. Either they're from Hong Kong or Taiwan, from the U.S. So I got to learn and work with business people from outside China. Number two, in terms of other interests, that is a sad part of my childhood, which is back then, like interest in art and music, I think it was perceived more as a distraction versus talents, right? My daughter is a ballet dancer. My son is a baseball player. So in this country, when I raise my kids, I spend a lot of time and put in lots of effort to support what they can do outside the classrooms. But back in my childhood days, I was basically told that you shouldn't be distracted. Everything, every minute, all your effort has to go into those books and have to go into your GPA, basically, and stay as an A student. So I didn't.
Well, let's face it, you were also working for your grandfather.
Right.
That took a lot of your time.
So I was told to stop drawing and to do the writing. No.
Right.
I think I always had some kind of interest. I'm a very creative person. I regret that I didn't pursue more of the artistic skills. When I was at Deerfield for my fall visit, I was actually in my son's art class, and the parents were handed pencil and paper, and I did my part of the participation. And my son looked at it and said, like, "Oh, now I know where I got my talent."
Oh, what a beautiful thing to say! Yes, right. But it was a memory for you, right? Huh?
Trust me, I was not good at all, but.
Well, that's terrific. So, great. So you finished your degree, made the decision to go to grad school. Was there any work that you did before, or did you begin applications and take your GMAT while in China, and then went directly to grad school after completing your graduation?
I didn't waste a day.
I could imagine.
I went straight out. China, and I work part-time anyway, but
what type of work was that?
As I said, helping overseas companies and work in their representative offices, and did lots of.
And that was paid work?
Absolutely. I made more money than my parents from the start.
Right.
And it helped me save up a little bit, and bought myself the tickets. I got a scholarship at St. Mary's University for MBA program in
fantastic.
Halifax, Nova Scotia. The furthest you could go from China.
Pretty much, yeah. It's hard to get further away from that. Was that what were some of your other choices for grad school?
I couldn't pursue any others less than a full scholarship. Because I still had to apply for a visa. And in order to get a visa, either to the United States or Canada, you had to be financially sustained. But the Chinese parents back then, not like today, they could pay for everything today. But back then, there's no financial resource.
Oh, yeah. No, but absolutely.
Only scholarship that will enable a student like me to get a visa. So that's the one, and that's where I went.
Yeah, fantastic. And have you lived in North America since then, or did you return to China after you finished your MBA?
Yeah, so I was in Canada for the first year. I transferred myself to the Bay Area and got my MBA from Haas Business School at UC Berkeley.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it. So you didn't complete your MBA there at St. Mary's.
I pretty much stayed in North America since 1991. It's 27 years. That's a long time.
So are you a citizen? You're a citizen now?
Yes.
I understand.
I became a citizen 1999.
Berkeley's a great school. Our oldest son got his mechanical engineering degree there, and he's been working at Ford in Detroit for the last several years.
Wow.
And, he grew up down here in Southern California, where I am today, and we enjoyed having him closer to home. But Haas is a terrific school. So, did you kind of just do 1 year at both locations? Is that kind of how it worked for you, or did Haas require you to, kind of redo courses?
Yeah, I actually did the whole 3-year. Program. Yeah, because I was working at the same time.
course. And what kind of work were you doing then during your years at Berkeley?
I was international business manager at a company called S&W Fine Foods.
Okay.
It's
sure, you know them well.
Year brand and
canned food for the most part.
Yes,
I recall.
Yeah. And lived in San Ramon, which is a nice suburb, and commuted to school while working full time. And it was very busy years at that time.
Now, were those finance positions, marketing? What did you do at S&W during those years while you were at Haas?
I was international business manager, so I applied analytical skills as working for the executive VP of worldwide sales, and I did lots of sales planning. Also did marketing projects on new products and the new market entry strategy for new business development. It was a very versatile position as to have early P&L responsibilities for certain territories, working with overseas distributors, but also have sales and marketing training, understanding how to develop a product, what is the life cycle of a product, and the new business or new product planning. So very thorough training in
it's a great company. And were you focused on China or the Asia region, or were you looking at multiple international markets for them?
I worked directly for the head of sales, so I had a global view. I was even involved in projects in the U.S. as well. And eventually, I earned my responsibilities to oversee part of Asia, including China. Yeah.
Fantastic. And did you have people responsibilities during those Haas years, or were you more of an individual contributor in those roles?
I had subordinates who were much older than I was.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So when I walked in and I got an office, and you had all these people in cubicles outside, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Absolutely. What were some of those early leadership lessons then, particularly with working or having people that were more senior in years to you working for you?
I think there are three things. Managing up and down is critical. So we're not just managing our subordinates, we're managing our bosses as well. So having that relationship and understand the objectives and work towards those objectives are very important. And number two is number is everything in business. As having analytical skills, had my international finance degree and then more of a marketing focus in MBA at UC Berkeley. Basically, and analytically, I was the first one who carried laptop. So, being able to articulate and providing analysis around the business. Number three is all communication, meaning that either writing memo, writing a market research paper, communication in business. Today, it turned to be a little bit too casual for me. I think because of social media, Twitter and all of that. I still write, my weekly summaries to my shareholders, even today. And they love it. I just had a call with one of my board observers who's in London. And he said, well, everything you said, it took me only half an hour. And we went through very critical points. And he said, everything you said makes a lot of sense because you had communicated with us on a weekly basis. So I think those are the things are critical.
No substitute for good communications. So did you join S&W full time then when you completed your MBA at Haas?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how many years were you with them, including the time that you worked there part time during school?
over 5 years, and
Or 5 years.
and
Fantastic.
then I went to LeapFrog. Got interested
Yeah.
in technology and interactive
Technology.
media,
Yeah.
and have been doing startups since then. So it's very different. It's very different um, uh, in terms of working in Silicon Valley versus a traditional consumer packaged good company.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that, because that's a pretty big pivot. S&W, very well established company, been around a long time. I'm sure a growing export business, and then to go to tech. What was it? I mean, one of the things, of course, was location. Right, you're right in the center of Silicon Valley and all that's going on there. But there had to be other things that attracted you to go into technology. What were they?
I think there are the the benefit the benefits I have in terms of pursuing a career shift like that really is my education, my experience, and my capability or track record in terms of build something from nothing, right? I think when a company like LeapFrog, they want to grow rapidly in Asia after their initial success in the US, they're looking for people who are going to bring a holistic approach for the business.
Oh, so were you recruited over? Is that kind of how you made that first move from
This is
S&W to
interesting
LeapFrog?
because I had my first child, my son in Deerfield, as we just talked about. So I had my first child. He was born in 2002. I got my job at LeapFrog at the end of the year of 2002. So I fell in love with LeapFrog products. Okay, very interactive, very educational, and I basically built a portfolio of what I did before, and the recruiter at LeapFrog was smart enough to bring me in, and I tell you, I probably had interviews with more than 10 people. And eventually I met their president of worldwide consumer sales. Tim Bender was very, very open-minded, and he gave me the job to come in. I started with mostly marketing for Asia Pacific, and then I became the senior director, and eventually I wrote a proposal, went to the board, and I got investment to go to China and build LeapFrog China as a founding CEO. So it was quite a run.
Yeah. How many years were you with LeapFrog, Helen?
Just about 5 years.
And what was their size in sales at the time you joined, and what was it when you left?
I think when I joined, it was almost nothing, right?
Yeah, just getting started, right?
Getting started, and our first focus is Japan. I work with like four predominant companies in Japan. As a Toys in Japan, Banasa in Japan, Gakken is a publisher in Japan, and Sega is one of the biggest gaming company in Japan.
Right.
So Japan was really the beachhead, and then we got into Korea. We launched the product as an English learning platform, had a huge success, and then we turned our focus on China. Obviously, China is a much bigger market. So to answer your question, we probably went from zero to, 75 million for the whole region in a very short period of time. It's a great platform to have. iPad, LeapPad is really iPad before iPad
Right. That's
came
right.
out.
Yeah,
So
no.
it was very rewarding.
And what was the size of the company at the time of your departure? The business you
750 million.
So you had about 10% or so of that, and pretty much built that from scratch. Yeah, fantastic. And then did you move back to the U.S.? Because you've done pretty much successive startups since then, as
Yeah.
I have read your resume. So tell me a little bit about two things. Number one, how did you return back to the States? And what's inspired you to do, really things from scratch, where, as there's so much risk involved and so many new companies do not succeed.
I got recruited by one of the co-founders of LeapFrog when Jim McGrath started Livescribe, which is another startup company.
Right.
He knew that we would work together again.
Yeah.
And so I went to Livescribe, and I was the only female founding senior staff member.
Yeah, you were in the C-suite then. Did you report into the CEO in that role? What was your responsibility at Livescribe?
I was worldwide sales, and it's very unusual to have a minority woman.
Oh yes,
in that room, and constantly meeting with investors and looking after not just Asia, China, but really the worldwide sales, including Best Buy and the US K-12 market and all that. So so that was quite a run. We built it from 0 to 50 million within 3 years. And yeah, lots of hard work, but it was.
Did you think your leadership style changed? Tell us a little bit about at that point at Livescribe. Were there other things that you learned and other things that you thought of as it related to what was important, in terms of managing business and managing people?
I think there are 3 things. One is I'm not just managing my salespeople and my distributors and my staff. I'm building alignment across R&D, marketing, finance, logistics, operations. So being in that room as a senior staff member, having the weekly meetings and talking about weekly status, talking about strategy. So that's number one. Is a broader sort of a strategic role versus just focusing on delivering results. Number 2 is board and investor relationship. How to communicate effectively and meet expectations or build expectations. And I think number 3 is, when things become challenging, especially we're in the space that iPad and all the bigger companies are coming in with products that not necessarily, benefit our effort because we're selling smart pen and paper. It's very traditional versus a screen-based media. How to stay on the course and decide which segment we get in. It's a great learning curve. And it's a wonderful experience. So I always tell people, wherever you are in your career, try a startup or 2. I think it's just something that help you to expand your awareness. So that's.
Even if you don't succeed at them, they are tremendous in terms of getting that type of learning that you can apply to the next assignment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Helen, you'd mentioned the diversity issue, and I'd like to just talk about that for a few minutes. Very interestingly, next week we have one of our regular webinars, and we're inviting in a consultant that's talking about diversity and inclusion and how to really make those both work to grow profits for your company. The U.S. is a very ethnocentric society, as I'm sure you've learned over these last several decades here. And, you'd mentioned being an Asian woman in the room. How did you kind of come over maybe some of the prejudices and or some of the preconceived notions that perhaps some of the, older, probably predominantly male and white board members that you encountered in terms of, recognizing your skills and your intellect and your abilities?
I first of all, I want to give them the credit. I really think from day one, when I was hired by Chuck Smutney, who was the executive vice president at S&W, who hired me, who gave me the first job.
Yeah.
And basically, I saw a printed ad in San Francisco Chronicle. It's a newspaper, and I applied.
Yeah. I found my first job in a printed newspaper as well, so I'll have you know where I'm right up there with you.
I think I still have it somewhere.
Good, that's a terrific keepsake.
It took some courage to apply, knowing that I didn't have much of experience. But it takes even more courage and insightfulness for Chuck to say, Helen, you went from Beijing, China, to Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and you're here in my office in San Ramon, California, applying for this job. I think you deserve a chance.
He knew you were special. Yeah, he knew you were special, didn't he?
For no tangible reason.
Yeah, sometimes it is about luck, right? And it's about being in the right place at the right time and having someone that's willing to give you a shot, give you a chance.
Diversity and equal opportunities really apply to all races, all ages, all genders, because at the end of the day, we're here to make our contributions and to build a better life for ourselves, families, and the world. And I really think that if we just look at each other from, a cultural point of view and from professional point of view, and looking at the skill set and the capability, not just as a professional person, either you're an engineer or a marketing person or a creative person or a mechanic person, but just bring that skill set to a community and a group of people and be collaborative. I think we can all achieve great things and have lots of fun. I learned so much from all kinds of people, and I love that.
Well said. Well, very, very well said. So just progressing your career a bit, Chuck gave you the break. You obviously proved yourself and did a wonderful job. And of course, one opportunity, as we know, leads to another. But, as you grew in your responsibility and your contributions, did you ever run into, prejudice or bias where, you had to maybe overcome and or develop a relationship with people that might have had preconceived notions, maybe about the fact that, of your gender or of your race or background, or has that not been an issue for you in the companies you've chosen to work for?
It's always out there. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples. One, I was a Chinese American representing LeapFrog when I went to Japan. I was in the room with a dozen men.
Oh, Japanese all Japanese. Men, oh my goodness!
And I ran the meeting.
Wow.
So I think if the focus is on a responsibility as to be dominant as what it takes to get the business to the next level, we ought to prepare ourselves to represent who we are and what we're about, business-wise and personally. So I give you another example. Sometimes I joke with my husband, who's Caucasian from San Francisco. And I said, I've been CEO of Touchjet, right? I've been doing fundraising. And I said, sometimes I felt like if I'm not Helen Thomas, I'm Jeffrey Thomas. I may have raised more money. I don't know, right? So I think the data and the facts are out there, and whether or not, as a minority woman CEO, could sufficiently raise enough capital to grow my business, that's a challenge for me. But I'm not complaining. I'm just keep going. I'm still working at it. I'll keep working at it, and hopefully I'll get where I want to be.
Well, I think you have a very unique and open approach, Helen. And I must say, from the very first conversation that we had about planning this podcast to today, I can tell that you have a very unique worldview. And, I worked in Asia long enough to know what it must have been like walking into those room of 10 Japanese businessmen, which, have a lot of preconceived notions about the world in which they work and what they do. And to be able to win them over and be able to accomplish what you've done, that takes a very, very special personality. Have you gotten that kind of feedback? Do people tell you that, you have a uniqueness in your approach to others?
No, I haven't got very direct any so far feedback. Um, there are a few things. One, and I traveled a lot because I was head of worldwide sales around Europe, around the world, even Middle East, and all that. And the people sometimes ask me like, how did you do that? Like I had like special investors from different countries. I had an NFL player, retired NFL player, as an investor in Chicago in my company right now. So so I think it's just a cumulative um, effect as being a person well exposed and be adaptable and earn the respect and return that respect. And the things just kind of just happen along the way. I think I'm just very fortunate. I'm just very fortunate that I'm in a family that's very open. My husband has four sisters, and I have lovely, in-laws. And I'm part of, the world and the community, and they are part of my journey as a person. So but thank you for what you said.
Yeah, well, you've got that feedback now. But I think also, if you don't mind me saying, I think you see yourself first as a world citizen, and you see yourself as someone who, and this is just my impression, as someone who has been successful. You're obviously very smart. You've had great experiences. And I think if you go into situations like that, it tends to let others kind of back away from maybe some of their preconceived notions about you. Would that be a fair
I
statement?
think that's a very insightful statement, and I love that. I love that. Yeah.
I can tell because I think that, so often we do get caught up into stereotypes, or we do get into ways in which, well, gosh, is this person going to think of me that, or what have you? And I don't think you worry about that. I think you lead with your philosophy about being that world citizen and your success. And, I'm sure you've had people that say no thanks, and you move on to the next one. And I think that's sounds to me anyway, if you don't mind me saying, a very important part of your success strategy.
I appreciate what you said, and I will keep on working at working at it in a very uh, interesting world right now, given social media and everything, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I think I should reflect more on it because where we are today. So that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
No question. Well, we're coming up on our hour, but I want to talk a little bit about people, kind of what you do and how you evaluate them and build teams. So, give me a little bit of a riff and some background on, how do you make bets on people you invest in? You've built businesses from scratch. You've had to make a lot of hiring and firing decisions. And, a lot of our audience are folks that, are got their eyes on a corner office like you've been able to achieve, or even the C-suite. And, what are the types of things that make a difference when you decide to make hiring decisions?
I think that we have to be very respectful in a way that it's a two-way street, right? As much uh, as a CEO and a hiring manager, we are selecting talent, but we are also being selected as to whom they will be loyal and committed to build their career. So I think the first is really so-called a culture fit, or it's just it's a fit, right? Like, do we fundamentally like to work with each other? I think that's very important, no matter how big or small the organization is. And
And when you say fit, do you see fit as a personal choice in terms of how, if you were interviewing me, how you and I would work together, or is it more of a corporate company fit, or is it a combination of both for you?
I think first is it's a corporate culture, and it's
Right.
a career fit, right? I
Yeah.
think the personal relationship comes later because this is a job. This is a
That's right.
business we're building, and being aware of each of us is contributing to a culture, and the chemistry is built together cumulatively. Everybody has impact on where this goes. So I think having that mission statement, having that vision shared, having a positioning that is well defined is very important, so that when they walk into the door, they know what this is all about.
Right. And they can almost pre-screen against that,
Exactly.
right? And not show up if they don't think they're aligned to that.
And also be very upfront about objectives. I think it's defining what the job is and what it takes to be successful is very important. So I always want to make sure that I understand what they've done previously in terms of problem solving. I always want to
Right.
understand, um, you know, how they did certain things from the start to the end, and to understand their thought process as well as um, their approach to challenges as well as to successes, and what makes them successful, right?
Right.
And then really empowering the people whom they work for to make the decision. I don't make all the decisions. I let other people make decisions, and I think it's a very collaborative environment, to make everybody happy and successful in a fast paced team, especially
Right.
at a startup.
Right. Yeah, no question. Thinking about your executive suite, how do you interview and hire there? Or what are some of the interview questions? What are some interview questions you use?
In the executive suite, it's a very long conversation. It's ongoing experience as a team, right? So the questions are always around about three things. One, where they want to be, right? I think that's a typical question at the highest level. Where do you see this company going to be in 3 5 years? That's what they ask me. And I would ask them, where do they see themselves to be? So that's
right. Where do they want to take it? Right.
Projection is important, right?
Yeah.
Number two is what you've done, what you've done well, and how you did it. The more understanding we have in terms of how things got executed and how things are accomplished, the better. And the more details we could, not on day one, obviously, and once again, it's a process to really get to know each other. And then number three is, instead of just jumping into a hiring, is interesting because one of the recruiters called me about 2 weeks ago about this very successful businessman who's funding this whole startup, who's the chairman and want to hire a CEO. And I said, that's interesting because he can make all the decisions in the world. And that's one-on-one relationship. And sure enough, today we circle back, we're supposed to have a follow-up conversation. And she said, well, he made a decision. We didn't expect him to make a decision. I said, I did. When you have all the power and the control, you can, right? But do you want to, right? So I always believe in, especially on the C-suite level, hiring slow. Hiring slow is the bad thing you could do. But on the other hand, though, I have people have been working for me, with me in the past 15 years. And I build those relationships along the way. There are people that have always been with me. And even we took breaks here and there. So having those resources and then being, together, regardless where we are, is the biggest asset you can have in your in the career. I'm sure you're well aware of that.
Well, listen, last question for us, Helen. You've been very generous with your time. What about career and life advice? Someone that might have their eyes set on either the corner office or perhaps getting in the C-suite, but maybe they're, 10, 20 years younger than us. What kinds of counsel would you provide someone who has aspirations? What are the types of things that you think is important for them to do with their careers to ultimately achieve their goals of getting into that C-suite position?
Life is a journey, and I wouldn't see that corner office as a destination. I would focus on the journey. I never ever said to myself I wanted to be a CEO. I was recruited. I was recruited quite a couple of times.
Right.
And to be honest, I think once your skill set, with your experience and with your enriched life as a whole, and you're enabled to achieve great things, you'll be in that position. And that's probably the best thing I could give as advice, is just focus on the journey, and the destination is there.
Helen Fu Thomas, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming into the corner office with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.